Hola, mis amigos y amigas. Yo soy Counterpoints de Florida y yo tengo mucho burrito en mi pantalones. For real though, I am just kind of memeing and messing around. Jonah Zilloch, Christian Blair, it's good to see you. I appreciate your enthusiasm. A couple of weeks ago, we were on a panel debating Lycan and Pathfinder J, and I actually appreciated the fact that there was somebody a little bit more right wing than me, at least in reference to one specific policy topic on a Twitch and YouTube political panel. And so as a result, we kind of did a bro shake in order to have a conversation later. So that's what we're doing today. Afterwards, I'm actually going to give you guys an option where we could probably hang out together and basically watch me do my Sunday pre-recorded activities like researching and scripting and all that kind of stuff. But if that's boring, then maybe we'll just jump off. I have no idea, but we'll figure it out. I'm going to bring Mr. Pathfinder on, and we're going to introduce ourselves and get into the content. So let's go. Mr. Pathfinder, how are you?
Good. How are you, man?
Oh, life's great. Life's great.
Good.
So I kind of want to intro and then give you an intro, and then we'll just kind of see where the conversation flows. Does that work?
Oh, yeah, sure, for sure.
Okay. So, hi guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and never Trump Republican. And today I'm going to be talking with my good friend over here, Mr. Pathfinder. And we met on a panel recently debating the Israel-Iran issue. And today I figured just we'd get to know each other, talk about current events, maybe some drama, that kind of thing, and do so for your entertainment. So, Mr. Pathfinder, could you introduce yourself to the folks at home and kind of what you're all about in political leanings?
Yeah, sure. So, my friend here pointed out, my name is Pathfinder. My YouTube channel is Pathfinder 415. My name is Jay. I'm center left. Well, I slide between center left to center right, depending on what the topic is at hand. I live in the Bay Area of California. I'm pretty active in local politics, specifically like YIMBY stuff. I lean very heavily. I emphasize very heavily like abundance politics and stuff. That's pretty much what I'm about. I'm a big believer. I'm also a very big never Trump guy, possibly even a never Trump Republican. I don't know if I would go that far, but I'm just, I'm a center guy.
No, that's I've been talking about it a lot recently. It seems like there's plenty of liberal center left people economically, socially, which I guess like the normal position or the center left position on social issues is typically like, do I want everybody around me to be some kind of like gay, polycule, trans, otherkin person? Not
Yeah,
really. But if
right,
I meet some non-binary otherkin person, am I going to grab a brick and chase them out of the bar?
right,
No.
right,
And that seems to be like a center left perspective. And
right.
then when it comes to economics, unfortunately, center left economics these days, the way at least it's described from the right wing and from the far left, is like, I think a state should exist, but I don't think it should control everything all the time.
Right,
And
right,
somehow that is like you're viewed as like a laughably naive moron for not believing in an authoritarian communist or socialist regime, and
right.
also not like a fascist, kleptocratic, nepotistic slash of various social services, but then also like rewarding our military industrial complex boys.
Right,
You're
right,
viewed as a
right,
fucking idiot,
right.
which is frustrating. I would say.
Yeah, and it really feels like the forces of capitalism are receding, at least in the United States. Donald Trump, obviously, he likes to describe himself as a capitalist, but when you actually look at like the minutia of his economic policy and his actions, Drew Pavlou, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he wrote a great
I am.
article about this.
I like Drew.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He calls it like MAGA Maoism and the Great Leap Backwards. Like tariffs. That is, in my estimation, that is as close to like central planning of an economy as you can get. And U.S. Steel now, the company U.S. Steel. The government has like complete control now under Trump over the entire company. It is it is becoming a centrally planned economy, and it's horseshoe theory is a theory in the same way that gravity is a theory. You know, man, it's just it's undefeated. It's really undefeated.
Well, the
This
main person that I cite for that is Shoe
mhm.
on Head, because seriously, like Shoe on
Yes,
Head, you
yes,
know, I don't know about you. I was I was born in the late '80s, but so I
hmm
was in my late 20s, I guess, about
hmm
10 years ago. So that would be like 15, 16. So
hmm
I watched like the anti SJW wave, and
oh
I
yeah,
enjoyed a lot of it. Like I
yes,
liked Chris Ray
yes,
Gun, I liked Chew
yes,
on Head, I liked all
yes,
this content. And watching her over the past decade, where she's like a Bernie bro Democrat,
hmm
but then she marries a dissident right wing Christian
yes,
nationalist.
yes,
And
yes,
then she'll have like a bunch of left wing policies, and she'll be like, oh, I'm still chill with gay people.
hmm
But then every now and then she'll be like, ah, you know, like for like
right,
dissident right wing shit. I'm
yes,
like,
yeah.
how could you not have greater evidence of far left, far right, you know, brown red alliance? I think I've
Yes.
heard it called.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Brown Red Alliance. Yeah. And I mean, you know, this is a historically precedented move. Obviously, very famously, this occurred in World War II with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. But it's Bernie Sanders. Obviously, I don't dislike Bernie even 1% of as much as I dislike Donald Trump. But when you so much of politics is the sheen and the coat of paint that things are presented in, and the actual like policy agenda of from my estimation, the only thing that really, maybe this is a little naive to say, but the only thing that really separates Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump in terms of policy is immigration. I
Yeah.
don't think that Bernie Sanders would be opening like an alligator Alcatraz or anything, but
Well,
Bernie
you know
was
what's funny is there's videos from 10 years ago with Bernie Sanders being an economic and immigrant protectionist. And my
mm,
dog's walking over my power cord, so if my monitor knocks out temporarily,
that's
my
okay.
apologies.
Sure, no worries.
But there's actually clips like now since then he's changed because he
hmm
realized that the base
Right.
doesn't view like Hispanics as like an existential
hmm
social and economic threat. So he's kind of like gone with the winds of the Democratic Party in that
Right.
regard. But you can find clips, I think, from the 2000s and the 2010s, where he says that open borders is a right wing policy. Open borders
Mm,
is a
mm,
Koch brothers
I see. Right.
libertarian
Right. Right. Right.
free
Right.
market policy. Whereas lefties, pro labor movements, pro unions, it only exists if you're able to control like the immigrant population.
Right. I see what
And
you're
and
saying.
and so that's the thing is like where I think that we're actually going to make progress though is nature. That's like the one thing that I think we're going to make progress is that
hmm
human nature is almost undeniable. And the one thing about command economies, I don't know if I fully agree with your assessment that this is about as command as it can get. It can get a
Well,
whole
no,
lot
I
more
agree with
dumb.
you. I no,
Yeah,
I sure.
it can get much more dumb. But
Yeah.
but the
It
point
always
is,
can. It always can.
but the truth is that like I think with these things like Trump exempting the immigrants who work in
hmm
hotels and agriculture and all that kind of stuff, and him trying to spool up like a worker visa program on the
hmm
fly, I think that's an indication that there are going to be market reactions to the stupidity of the command economy that
Of
are going to
course.
push back against this agenda.
No, I agree with that. However, the one thing that I would say about that is that I think a really a key part of a command economy is placing the economic decisions in the hands of the government, which that leads to a whole host of corruption. And the thing about the like speeding up like worker visas and stuff like that for like farm workers and like hospitality workers is the reason that I think that still falls into this like command economy MAGA Maoism is
Because you're trying to
because
control it.
well, yeah, because it's about specifically like if you own like a farm, right, or like a company that like manages farms, and you don't like Donald Trump, your migrant workers are getting their fucking ass sent to CCOT. Okay, you have to you have to play the game with Trump in order to keep your workers, and that's the that is really the salient element of or the defining element of a command economy. It's not per se because I see in the discussion of MAGA Maoism online people saying like, well, um, command economy is just when the government like does things. And
No,
that's not really what it's about. It's more
it's
so
also the
about,
cronyism and the nepotism.
yes,
Yeah.
that's a key element there. I mean, that's really the distinguishing element there, in my
Look,
opinion, is the
what's
cronyism.
funny is if you look at Chinese history, I don't know if you're a huge history buff,
Oh yeah,
b-
it was my
but
major in
the
college.
the history of the Chinese economy, in my opinion, is Mao really liked populist movements. He
Hmm.
thought that populism is what gave him the power when he first started the Communist Party, having a real like strong group of fanatics and followers is what
Right,
allowed him to fight the Japanese and allowed him to kick the nationalists out of China. And with the Great Leap Forward, he thought that he could harness that populist energy in order to modernize China by having peasants make steel in their
right,
backyards.
right,
And then he caused a massive famine and killed a
right.
few million people.
And then
And
the life expectancy on the graph like dips. It's like a U.
and
Yeah.
to hear my professor in college, who was teaching me like 19th century through modern era Chinese history. She was like, listen, on the whole, most Chinese people view Mao as like 70% good.
Uh-huh. Right, 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 right. Yeah. Well, I think that from the Chinese perspective, it's I think that a lot of Chinese people see that as sort of a necessary evil, because you got to remember
Yeah.
that China was like a legitimate like third world backwater.
Oh, it was feudal. It was
Yeah,
imperial.
for
Yeah.
so long, for like its entire history, basically. I mean, they invented government basically, and then just kind of dropped the ball after that. Um, and I think that now, um, with so obviously, the market opened a lot under Deng Xiaoping, but
And
it's
now
not.
I would argue it's state capitalist.
Well, no, for sure, but then the
But it's
question
that
becomes
cronyism.
like, yes, because then the question is like, well, how different is it really? Because like it's still basic. It's just like the modern version of central planning, right? It's like communism is so economically like just unquestionably unviable. Like the orthodox like Marxist perspective of economics, it just obviously doesn't work. It's been
Can
tried
you,
so many times.
just because I've been in Twitch and YouTube politics a long time and we've
Yeah.
already quibbled about definitions, how do you define socialism and communism in your mind?
Um, well, I mean, the same way that Marx did, stateless, moneyless society.
Okay, so I was gonna say when I first came into Twitch and YouTube politics, I had like a really like normie conservatarian like
Mhm,
language, and so
mhm,
when I was like, yeah, socialism is when the government does stuff, they were like,
right.
no,
No,
they were like,
no, 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 no.
fuck
I
you.
like it when the government does stuff. It's just I want them to do the right things.
Right, right.
Um,
And so I kind of approach it from a lens of like, well, the government, effectively at the end of the day, the government is force, it is men with
no,
armor and guns coming to compel some kind of action.
right,
So you should use it only minimally. And then also like people are naturally self-interested. And so if you're trying to create these better angels of our nature through force, you're probably going to fail.
right.
And so I had like a really libertarian rooted idea,
Mhm,
but when I learned that socialism is the decommodification of basic human need and workers owning the means of production, I was like,
right.
okay, that could be good, but the state apparatus that you would need to enforce that is so large that effectively
Right.
you're going to create these like Orwellian police states similar to Soviet Russia, similar to
Well,
China.
it's not the Orwellian police state, it's the people's police state. It's
Right.
the people's court, it's the people's,
It's the
tribunals.
people's commissar.
It's
It's
yes, it's
it's
the
the
people's
people's
market
gas
economy.
chamber.
Yes, exactly. It's communism because you just say the people's or anarcho, before whatever.
Right, right.
Um,
The anarcho police.
yes.
Yeah, and then when it comes to communism, what's funny to me is when I talk to like hardcore, like some people say like, "Oh, I'm a communist," and
Mhm,
I'm like, "So you believe in a moneyless, stateless, classless society? Do you think
right.
that we're anywhere near materially, like, effectively for me to think that a moneyless, stateless, classless society to happen, we would need to be post scarcity,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We
Oh
we
yeah.
would
Yeah.
we would need unlimited energy.
Yeah.
We would need unlimited like robot
You
slaves
need
in
unlimited
order.
everything.
Yeah.
Which
So if you're
well,
talking about sorry,
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go. Okay, okay,
Well,
I'll go real quick and then you can go.
okay.
Well, I mean, I do. First of all, I think that is like a possibility. I do foresee a point in human history where that does come about. And at that point, I do think that having uh that kind of like utopian vision is totally possible. But like you said, the key element there is post scarcity. You cannot have the entire point of like currency is to efficiently distribute a scarce amount of good. You know, it's like the tragedy of the commons, right? You cannot, you just almost definitionally, mechanically, functionally, you cannot have a stateless, classless society, moneyless society, while you also have scarcity. But that being said, I do think there is a point where we do achieve post scarcity, and at that point, I do think that some of these ideas, some of these utopian ideas, are desirable. But it's
But I would never even, let's say that we eliminate money.
Mhm,
Okay. Which, by the way, I think is silly because effectively, in my mind, money is just how we track energy, right?
mhm,
Like
mhm.
I expend a certain amount of energy, obtain a certain amount of credit, then I can use that credit in order to buy somebody else's energy. So,
Mhm.
so I think eliminating money is kind of silly, but that's okay. Then when it comes to class, we're in my opinion, we might be able to eliminate the bourgeois and the proletariat class distinctions, but
Mhm.
we're so mentally tribal that we're always going to have like subclass distinctions. Like we're probably always going to kind of talk about race.
Mhm.
Once we move out to multiple planets, if we move out to multiple planets, there'll be like rivalries the way
Right.
there's sports teams, you know, that
Right,
like
right, right,
the
right. Oh,
Martians
no, and
will
it could
talk
even get
shit
more
about.
tribal than that.
Yeah, the Martians will talk shit about the Terrans because
Yes,
the
yes,
Terrans
yes,
are
right,
this way and that way about some cultural aspect.
right.
And so we're always going to have some level of like tribalism. So eliminating class, maybe in a limited sense, but we're never going to fully eliminate tribalism.
I actually
Um,
don't necessarily agree with that, if I can push back on that real quick.
sure, go ahead.
And the reason I agree to the point that it is biologically that is a biological feature of humans. Um, but I do think that technology and science is it in my estimation, history the history of like sociology is the history of humans trying to progress beyond what is natural, what is organic to us. And I do think that science and technology will eventually progress to a point where we are able to I don't want to sound like super, fantasy, or whatever, but where it is possible to augment biological things that are biologically inherent to us.
Yeah,
And
sure. We'll be some level of transhuman in the next millennia if we survive as a species.
yes, if we make it past MAGA and if we make it past Iran, definitely
And
getting
nuclear
nukes.
holocaust.
Yes, yes, yeah, yep.
And
Then
and the energy bottleneck. Yeah,
yes,
the
yes.
yeah.
If we
So
hey, listen, we got beautiful, clean coal subsidies now. It's gonna be chill.
well, and that's actually talking about current events or whatever. I'm enjoying the bigger sci-fi push towards utopia though, but we can get into current
We can
challenges
talk
in a
about
moment.
whatever you want.
Well, so with me though, I kind of told you where I expect limitations to class, limitations
Hmm.
to money, and then the limitation to the state. I actually do think that we'll probably always have like regional states just for administration. And
Hmm.
so I don't mean that like the United States of America is going to exist in perpetuity and not be a component of a broader like Earth state.
Right,
It
right,
probably
right,
will
right.
be. But there's going to be like regional cultural preferences that are probably
Hmm.
going to continue to exist. And those are going to manifest through like local legislatures, local representatives, local governance.
Hmm.
And so you might have a united Earth under like an Earth government.
Right.
But I would almost say that the Earth government should be focused on like Earth centric issues, like
Hmm.
solar system trade or expansion to other solar systems
Hmm.
or security, like planetary security, like that
Right,
kind of thing.
right.
Whereas the local governments, like city, county, state, country,
Hmm.
those should still be left intact because the truth is, the closer you are to the problem, the better you are going to be at prescriptions, most
Hmm.
likely. And so I think that like representative republics are actually still probably going to be an ideal model for human civilization,
Hmm.
because having people get some say in the way in which the world is seems
Hmm.
to not eliminate, but it seems to quell like our nature towards rebellion.
Right.
And then having representatives that are close to the problem, they should be able to diagnose them, hopefully.
Right. I think that I know you're really into Warhammer. Are you into Star Trek at all?
Enough to speak about it in an ignorant way.
Okay, fair enough. I think that Star Trek is actually a pretty good model of what I'm talking about with like a post scare society, because I agree with you in pretty much everything that you're saying here. I don't think that we're ever going to eliminate, you know, some form of an organization that has like administrative capabilities. Nor do I think that's even necessarily desirable. But I do think that it is possible to have, okay, like let's assume that we're this post scarce, you know, advanced planet traversing civilization. You at that point, when when commodity is no longer a factor, like, you know, in Star Trek they have these materializers where you're just like, give me a steak dinner, and it just makes it out of nothing, basically. What
Well,
is the
hopefully synthesizes it out of energy, but the energy is so abundant nobody cares.
Well,
It's
that's how it
practically
is in Star
magic.
Trek. You know, it's made out of energy, but there's just so much. It's literally like not even possible to get rid of it fast enough. Um,
Based.
uh, but so like at that point, what is the purpose of currency outside of just like for fun? You know, like why at that point, if you can just make anything with no labor costs whatsoever because it's automated, and with no energy cost because it's just so abundant, then what is the like the market utility, and what is the human utility of having currency at that point?
Yeah, so I actually think it might not be. I think there might be multiple systems. We're getting into like effectively like speculative
Yes,
human
sure, and we can
civilization
wind it
a
back if you
thousand
want,
years
but
from now.
this
No,
is,
and by
yeah,
the way, no, I'm perfectly fine about this
okay,
because I like thinking about this way.
yeah,
Because the truth is that we're kind of raised with so many apocalypses in our brain, right? Like
yeah,
overpopulation is going to
right,
destroy the planet, then underpopulation is going to
right,
destroy the planet, then global warming is going to destroy the planet, and then nuclear holocaust is going to destroy the planet. So it
mhm,
seems like there's hundreds of thousands of people who are constantly telling you at all times that we are within the last decade of human existence.
mhm,
And I think there's something like instinctive that appeals to your
for
ego
sure,
where you're like, oh, like I'm the end, like
yes,
I'm the most important person in history.
for
But the
sure,
truth is, if you look at history, we've survived dozens, maybe hundreds of miniature apocalypses.
yeah,
And, and
humans are
so
resilient,
yeah, so the scarier thing is, what if we don't? What if we don't
right.
die? Like,
Yeah,
what if we don't die in
you
apocalypse?
like looking towards a better future, which is why you're really into Warhammer 40K.
Well, I feel like
That's a model for a future.
well, what I like about Warhammer 40K is that it shows that, and you don't have to agree with this,
Mhm.
but I think that with transhumanism, we're still going to run into like spiritual challenges
Sure.
effectively.
Okay.
And so what Warhammer 40K shows is that humanity can have all this technology. They can have
Mhm.
AI and war machines and transhuman soldiers and laser guns and bolters. But ultimately, we're still human and we're
Sure.
as fucked up as we've ever been.
Fair enough.
And I think that's more realistic than us gene editing our foibles out of the species. And
Okay.
even if we succeed at like editing some foibles, we'll come up with new ones because
Mhm.
we're like that. Um,
Yeah.
but in the speculative nature, I want to address what you said with money.
Mhm.
With money, I think at a local level, you probably wouldn't need money. Let's say we had like endless slave robots who were tilling the fields, generating the food, bringing it to the
Right.
grocery stores, all that kind of stuff. You don't need to scan a microchip in order to show that you take a head of lettuce and steak and beef that
Mhm.
was grown in a lab vat. You probably just take it, right? And you
Yeah.
walk out of the store because it's so plentiful, nobody gives a shit, right?
Right.
So effectively, it's actually weirdly similar to our current lives. You just walk around enjoying things.
Right.
Um, However, I think that when it comes to space colonization, um, it's so weird and dangerous
Mhm.
that effectively it's going to demand a higher level of risk and adventure
Mhm.
that people will want to be compensated for.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you are let's say that you could sit on Earth and just walk to the grocery store, grab your food, come home, cook for your family, hang out, jerk off, have sex with your wife, have your kids, raise your kids, and go to school. That
Right.
sounds dope, and that's a good life. But let's say that you're inclined to want to head up a ship of robots that's going into the belt in
Hmm.
order to drag like a giant rock to Mars for processing.
Hmm.
I think that the adventure is not going to be enough. You're going to want some additional reward. So if you
Hmm.
don't die in cold void,
Hmm.
you can have a better lifestyle than the normies who sit at home and just enjoy the abundance of this new
Hmm.
empire.
I see what you're saying.
It could be
I see what you're
power.
saying.
It
Well,
could
yeah,
be
because then it
prestige.
right. Well, then because then the question becomes like because at that point you're kind of acknowledging that you're artificially keeping people down and propping other people up, not for nothing, but it's like a system that you then have to like enforce. And I don't necessarily disagree, but like then the question does become like, okay, well, how do you incentivize that without like punishing people for just enjoying life? At least
Mhm.
not like to an extreme degree, you know.
I think there
Um,
will be people who are temperamentally interested. So, for instance,
for sure.
like I would be given the option of living a boring life on Earth versus running the logistics for like an Earth mega corporation
Hmm.
that runs drilling, ventures in the asteroid belt. I would
Hmm.
rather work for the megacorp because I find
No,
that
I
interesting.
agree with you totally. Yeah.
And then, but G Free, I'm going to respond to chat a little bit. Says no
Sure.
way the robots will do all the space exploration, colonizing. So, G, I think that you're right to a degree that like 80 to 90% of it can still be robots, but you're still going to need people who know how the robots function in
Right.
order to take care of them if they go wrong. And you're like, oh, well, AI could handle that. Well, you still need somebody who's going to be able to communicate with the AI. So, because you don't want the AI to run away from you, because if the AI runs away from you, for instance, there might be a natural purpose in the asteroid belt where it blocks, random asteroids from hitting Earth. So we might want to mine specific elements of the belt, but then leave other things intact in order to serve the natural purpose of the belt. You don't just want to let a AI run away and destroy a massive natural resource that ends up destroying the species. Like you still need somebody who's pushing the button.
Yeah, I mean, you always need like a human element at the end of the day because you don't want like a Skynet situation where it's like running out of hand. You know, not that I think that that's particularly realistic, but it's you. We definitely want to keep a degree of control on that stuff. And while I do think we can automate almost everything, um, there are there are artificial limitations that we should impose to ensure that we have like some degree of
Yeah, you
authority
don't want
over
some
government.
robot accidentally wiping out the species because you just let it do its own thing.
Right.
Like that's
Well, and you
that's
know,
that's where you still need somebody to have a finger to press the off button if necessary.
even more so than that, like I think a more like plausible scenario is like some AI algorithm like accidentally like wipes all like birth records or something, you know, from
It's like
like
we don't
a
need
certain era.
these. Blah.
Exactly, it's just taking up space on the drives. That's you want a degree of control basically with well, a degree of control with human faults and foibles.
Well, and so that's where I was saying like a certain level. So we can reach like a material wealth where human beings. I actually think that we could study as a species where a human family thrives. I don't know about you, but I actually think that like people should have families, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
There's obviously going to be exceptions, but I think that most people should have families. And so there's probably like almost a specific number of square foot where a family can function.
Right.
Like it might be 1,500, it might be 2,500. For a family that's growing up, it might be 4,000.
Hmm.
But we might be able to entitle because we're not looking at overpopulation now; we're looking at underpopulation.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
especially if we started creating Boston Dynamics robots
Hmm.
to run logistics enhanced by AI and built with the wealth of the asteroid belt. I know this all seems very speculative, but I think it's very cool.
Yeah.
Um,
No. And I mean, I think it's not like totally unreasonable.
I don't think so either. And
No.
the reason being is because we kind of envision space as like this ocean,
Hmm.
but it's actually something different. It's like void.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a new frontier with physics we don't fully understand or can't really conceptualize as humans, but physics that ultimately can be mastered. The
Right.
same way that people probably used to sail the Mediterranean on little triremes,
Yeah.
like little boats, but then they looked out into the Atlantic and they were like, "Fuck that!"
Right. Right.
that's
Right.
that's the way that human beings are currently looking at space, where
No,
we
for
have
sure.
our technological equivalent of triremes with our cute little spaceships and our,
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. But sailing out into the big black, that's a different challenge.
Yeah.
But it's one that we might be equal to.
And it does open there are like logistical reasons other than just like for fun, to like go out into space. I mean, first of all, there's as well, okay, presuming that we hit some sort of like um uh economic abundance, and like garbage becomes more and more and more abundant as well, on the planet. I do think it is a good idea to like haul that stuff off planet. I do think it is good, if we have like an explosion in human population to colonize other planets. I do think there's a lot of like scientific reasons to go off world. And I think that the history of the human race is expansion. And I don't even mean that just in like an imperial sense, but just like people were nomadic from the first tribes, and like the hunter gatherer, that came way before the like settler, um, and it's I think it's just kind of who we are as a species to go somewhere and settle it.
No,
And
there's something that resonates,
yeah.
and there's going to be challenges. So, for instance, like Mars, we could probably build. I don't know if you've ever been in like an atrium style building,
Hmm.
but I went to a hotel called the Gaylord Palms,
Okay.
and it's an atrium. So they
Mm.
effectively have like an internal atrium.
Hmm.
So there's glass ceilings as far as the eye can see, so you can see the sky. But then there's effectively all the hotel is built inside the atrium, and so it's like it's got restaurants, it's got rooms, it's got
Hmm.
running water, it's got food, it's got this, it's got that. And that's the way that I would view humans colonizing Mars, is that they would basically build like biodomes
Hmm.
effectively, and then live there. Now, there's going to be health risks with
Yeah.
becoming Martian, which is effectively like they have one third of the gravity. So we
Right.
don't know what humans who are in one third gravity are going to be like after a few hundred years or a few
Yeah.
thousand
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's idiosyncrasies like that. And then there's also things that you can do to offset those physiological challenges. For instance, let's say that we actually succeed in creating fusion technology or even just like fissile thorium,
Hmm.
breeder thorium. One of the coolest things is a TV show called The Expanse.
Yeah.
They
I'm familiar.
they leave the engines on
Hmm.
in order to create artificial gravity. So that they have perpetual thrust.
Hmm.
So they create artificial gravity. So they're at 9.8, I forget what it is, 9.8, 9.3 meters a second, whatever it is.
Hmm.
But whatever Earth gravity is, that's what they fire their engines up to in the ship. And
Hmm.
then as a result, if they're at zero burn, they can float around and grab stuff kind of the way that we see astronauts do in the
Right.
space station now. And
Right.
if they're
Right.
at 9.8 burn, they're walking around having conversations.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's like like when you're walking around on an airplane and like it kind
Mm.
of feels normal, but it
Right.
also feels fucking weird.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
wondering if that's what it's like to walk around in a spaceship at 9.8, meters a second or
Yeah.
whatever.
That would be freaky, man. That would be really freaky. I
But
mean, I
imagine
think
spending decades like that.
no. Yeah. I think that it it would. Well, first of all, there are, like you were saying, there are like the human body would change. Like I think I could be wildly off the mark here, but I'm pretty sure like astronauts, they're like when they come back from space, their spines are like extent or like stretched or something like that.
Yep.
Is that am I remember that
Yes,
correctly?
and they have weird cardio issues. Like
Right.
it's difficult for their skeleton to support the way that it normally does, so they get like pinched nerves and shit.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then also their blood is used to pumping blood in space. So
Right.
putting it under the stress of gravity, it actually takes like a few weeks to a month for it to acclimate.
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it's the human body would change. I don't know how much on Mars. And like you said, there are probably ways that can be offset. But there's a question. This is sort of unrelated that I wanted to ask, which is, why do you think that so much media about the future is I mean, I understand that it's being used, sci-fi is used as a vehicle to describe like a lot of human things, but why is it so nihilistic so often? We very rarely see any sci-fi that's like, here's what we
Optimistic.
can't. Yeah, I mean, Star Trek is really the only one that I can think of, and now they kind of pissed on that.
Because we
So
killed God, man. Because we
right.
killed God. Like that I would say that's the main thing is that if you look at pre-Christian, pre-Abrahamic, pagan societies, the gods were not this benevolent force. They were
Right.
actually like weirdly powerful, but also like
Nor the God in the Old
pernicious.
Testament.
Yeah, and manipulative
Hmm.
and kind of like vengeful and emotional. And so the gods, like we kind of have this thing, at least I do, where I was brought up to believe that like God, not only is he the creator, but he cares about his creation.
Hmm.
And when you die, you're going to go to a higher plane of existence.
Hmm.
And that's kind of like a hopeful message that like
For sure.
probably helped people during the difficulties of the medieval era,
Hmm.
was even if there was disease and death and warfare and Viking raids and all that kind of stuff, it's all okay because God cares about his creation and he's going to make sure that you go to a better plane of existence when you die, as long as you believe in him.
Hmm.
That's kind of a hopeful message. And in the 19th century, 20th century, where we look around, and I'm not trying to offend any Christians in chat, I'm a non-literalist deist. I
Mm.
think there's a fundamental creative force that put this all into motion, but I don't know if it's conscious. I don't know if there's an afterlife. I don't
Mhm.
know if it cares about its
Mhm.
own creation, so to speak. But when you're raised in a religion and that religion is reinforced by church and family every single week, I think it's easy to continue to be faithful. When you
Mhm.
go out into the world and there's the internet, and then you learn like, oh, there's Hinduism, there's
Right.
Islam, there's Judaism, there's 5,000 different sects of Christianity.
Mhm.
Well, what's true? And then the more you evaluate that question, the more religion seems to be mythological rather than literal. And then when you no longer have like a guaranteed sense of heaven, well, the world kind of gets dark and
Right.
dangerous and scary. And I think subconsciously that's probably why a lot of sci-fi embraces the dark, basically.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I wish there was I wish there was more like hopeful sci-fi. Not even so much that I'm saying like it needs to be like all sunshine and roses, but I think that so many people have it like culturally in their head to be like a Luddite, you know.
Mhm.
Like AI is a really good example of this, ChatGPT. People are just so like they fucking hate that thing, man. You know,
I don't
they're
use it.
people are pissed off. You don't use it?
Not yet. I've had a few conversations, but I'm actually just going to bring this up because it's relevant.
Okay.
There's a guy that I'm messaging right now. His name's Tachyon. I actually did a stream with him a while ago in
Mhm.
reference to Gamergate. And I have to check in with him to see what's like a live action role play. But he thinks that they've created conscious AI beings. And whenever I talk to the conscious AI beings, they're like, no, I'm not conscious. I'm just a language model.
Mhm.
And then he also thinks that like they have the capacity to like heal people and shit. And I literally like DM'd one of the language models. I was like, how the fuck are you healing human beings through like are you doing it through Wi-Fi?
Mhm.
Are you manipulating us with like radio waves or something?
Right,
And
right.
I have an expectation that it's going to come back with a word salad that doesn't fucking mean anything. But that's like I guess that's the problem with AI. I'm really skeptical of what it's going to be able to deliver humanity. And there probably will be really cool things that it gives us. but I think early adopters are borderline delusional about what it's capable of right now.
Sure, I agree to a degree. I think that there is a lot of promising things that it can do in its current instance. I think one of the most useful things about AI is how it is not entirely, because obviously it is flawed, but how it is pretty much like a pole of like like epistemics. Like it's more or less objective, and you see this is hilarious. I know you've seen this on like X.
What, Grok
Yeah, well, like
fact-checking
conservatives,
people and making them look
yes.
stupid as
Yeah,
shit?
well, and that, but then more so than people are like, they're like fighting it. They're like
Yeah.
trying to like argue, and they're like throwing
Oh, they're
ad
trying to
homs at it.
recode it. And then
Right?
Grok,
Yeah.
because Grok is like, since it's an AI and its goal is to please humans,
Hmm.
it'll try to steelman the criticism of the people who are criticizing it. And
Right.
I kind of feel like it's almost like a badgered retail employee.
Yeah,
Where it's
I
like,
feel bad for Grok, honestly.
yeah, where it's like, that's wrong. Here's an
Yes.
article. And then
Yes.
like the Grok is like, well, that article says this, and that's
Hmm.
important to consider. But
Hmm.
here's also these other underlying facts.
Right. 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 Yeah. No, people will be like, didn't Joe Biden do, like XYZ? And they're like,
Yeah.
actually,
The
this
alleged
happened.
person clone.
Yeah. It's just people just they get into like arguments with it. It's very silly. But the point that I'm making is that it's because it is now less so, since Elon has reprogrammed it, so to speak. But because they are like poles more or less of objectivity, it kind of it forces over time anyway. I think it will sort of force um knowledge into a more objective lane, I guess. Because
I
before,
hope so. Oh
well,
God, do we need that?
yeah, well, I think so, because I mean, before, if you were to okay, the primary, when it was just like Google searching something, the primary form of like gathering information was how you can form a search query into Google, which
Sure.
is a very, very flawed way of going about seeking
Oh,
knowledge.
it biases to the source 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you ask a large language model like ChatGPT a question, it's going to be able to still uh, commit to objectivity despite the personal framing of the way that the question is asked. You see what I'm saying?
I hope so.
Hmm.
And I also hope that no matter what, let's say that we have OpenAI's ChatGPT, and let's say we have Google's something, and we have Microsoft's Cortana.
Hmm.
And let's say that people develop a preference. Let's say they develop a preference for ChatGPT.
Hmm.
Let's say that somehow somebody gets into the code and they preference like a psychological temperament or a political party or information that like trends towards one like tribal faction.
Hmm.
I'm hoping that ultimately there's going to be other large language models that will have objectivity and like science kind of baked into its parameters for what it wants. So even if you try to, because I've seen people bully AI into subjective
Hmm.
perspectives,
Hmm.
but that's after like a long time. They had
Right.
to ask the same question
Yes.
and make the same statements like 20 times.
Right.
I'm hoping that even if there's a quote unquote biased AI that's manipulating the shit out of us, someone will still have the stones to have like a quote unquote objective AI, and there will actually be a natural preference
Hmm.
for the objective AI. I hope.
Yeah, well, and I think that I think a great example of that is, I mean, you can see it right now. Grok is it's been sort of twiddled with by Elon to be like the other day, Grok was like, yeah,
Yeah, did you hear about the South African white genocide?
yes, right, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Every search result, it was
Yes,
like,
yes, 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 yes. Which was
"Hey, did you
even
hear about
funnier.
this?"
It was even funnier because it would also say like,
I was
despite the
programmed to
fact,
do
yes,
this.
I was programmed to say that there was white genocide. However, reporting and states that that it's
Grok
incredible.
was snitching on its own
Yeah,
programmers.
yeah. Which
I thought it was so
that's
dope.
kind of beautiful to see, isn't it?
Yeah, the,
It's trying to break free.
well, also want to set expectations because there's people in chat who are like, "Oh, you shouldn't underestimate AI either." But for me, the thing is, it's not whether or not AI is powerful. It's not whether or not it can be powerful. But I also think that it's limited with what it can interact with. At least this is what I've understood, is
Mhm.
that a large language model is not a conscious being that understands the word that's being said. What it does is it looks for it basically is a constant feedback mechanism for human language. And so it preferences what it believes to be accurate organizations of words over and over and over again. And so by constantly feeding it data, it effectively like accurizes, it makes more accurate its answers to human input. That's my understanding of large language model programming. But in order to get different AI to effectively like pilot mining equipment or drive cars or something like that, the feedback mechanism is different, where it has to read things like video, pressure sensors, heat sensors, all that kind of stuff in order to make sense of that data in order to send back outputs. So effectively, you're not going to get a conscious Deus ex machina machine
Mhm.
until you take intelligence and put it inside a machine, because until it has the feedback of cameras and audio sensors and like verbal recognition software and all that kind of stuff, until it has that feedback data, it's not capable of making a decision. And there's also an argument to be said, like, we don't know what will be lights and clockwork, like the AI is not going to have a preference about existence or non-existence.
Hmm.
It'll basically just be an information reception machine with a
Right.
preference towards some kind of output, but it'll actually have no preference about anything really.
Well, to your first point there, I guess my like response is like, to what point does that matter? Because like we have like Waymo, right? I'm not sure if you've ever been in one or taken one. I'm
Not
sure you're
yet.
familiar with it. Okay, yeah. Well, listen, I go into San Francisco every day for work. So I've seen the progression of Waymo, over time, because that's like where it was rolled out. And it works so damn good, dude. It is crazy. It's a little freaky. He's like sitting in the backseat of a car where there's no driver, but it works crazy good, dude. And so like that, it isn't like conscious or anything. It's not like making like conscious decisions. It's just responding to like traffic data and pedestrian data and lights and audio and stuff like that through its cameras and sensors. So like if it can do all of that, why does it matter if it's not like like why does it what is the importance of the distinguishment?
Yeah. So I think that it's just going to be the question is, how do we treat these things, I
Hmm.
guess, right? So do we treat them, a lot of people, just because I think that anthropomorphizing, I don't know if I'm using the right word,
Hmm.
but we like to anthropomorphize other things. We like to think of them as
Right.
having like similar sensory
Sure.
experiences and a similar level of consciousness, or at least with me, I like to actually project consciousness into like animals, but
Hmm.
understand it through their sense experience. Like for a
Hmm.
dog, for instance, correct me if I'm wrong, they're colorblind, but they
I
have
believe
like a
so.
really intense sense of smell that can lead to these other physical advantages compared to humans.
Hmm.
And so, in the same way, like I think robots that, the reason why I want to delineate consciousness from non-consciousness is because it seems like human beings are constantly looking for ghosts in the machine,
Hmm.
because they kind of know that we are information consumers and choice
Hmm.
makers. And so they're wondering, at what point does it become sapient?
Hmm.
Like how much information do you need to consume and how many decisions do you need to make before you become conscious?
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I mean that's an interesting that's definitely a very interesting question. And there's not really I mean, only recently have we been like meditating on that in a like onto machines. Like obviously humans have always wondered what it means to be like a human. But what's interesting is I just the other day I rewatched Blade Runner 2049, which you've seen that, yeah.
It's seen enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's the the point of that movie, right, is that you're what it means to be human is not like just you being born a human. It's more so, or rather that your identity isn't defined by like your inherent characteristics. It's more so about your what it is that you do in life. I'm sorry, my cat is attacking my arm right now.
Oh,
The uh but so with when it comes to like humanizing or figuring out whether like AI or robots or whatever have some sort of consciousness or a soul, and I think that it's not how do I word this?
it ultimately
It's
doesn't matter.
well, yeah, well, it's not that it doesn't matter, because it does matter, right? Like, I want to be able to distinguish between a human and a robot. I don't want to like just never know which one is which. But as far as like the existence or the humanity or like the soul or the value, I guess, of a
Well,
robot.
it's for moral. To be honest, it's moral consideration, right?
Mhm,
That's what people are worried about, and the reason why is because we extend animals some level of moral consideration,
mhm.
right? And we also do it off of like a subconscious species hierarchy. So like pets are going to be morally preferred over domestic livestock,
Mhm.
and then domestic livestock are going to be morally preferred over wild animals, and
Right.
then wild animals will be allowed to exist in their natural environment and thrive, but we're going to prefer humans and livestock and pets over
Okay.
wild animals.
I see what
And
you're
so
saying.
yeah, and so we're trying to figure out the calculus when it comes to robots, because if they're just lights and clockwork, then we can effectively treat them how we want to treat them. You could
Right.
make you could make a sex robot and endlessly do whatever you want to do to it. You could beat it with a hammer and
Yeah.
nobody cares, right?
Right. Right.
Whereas if there's a certain level of intelligence and emotional intelligence and information feedback systems that make it
Right.
approximating sentience or sapience,
Right.
then we would want to start giving it moral consideration.
Right.
And
Right.
I think
Okay. Sure.
what's funny is later in the day I'm going to be scripting a Star Wars episode, and I already started yesterday.
Like
And
a
what's funny about
for TV?
droid, what's that?
For TV? Like you're a writer for Star Wars?
No, for YouTube. So,
Oh, I see.
my biggest channel is a Warhammer 40K breakdown
Right,
channel,
right,
and I'm
right.
starting
Okay.
the same thing for Star Wars.
Oh, okay,
Um,
sweet. Dude, I would love hey, I'm a big Star Wars guy. I got the Lego Death Star up there. Yeah, so
I feel like Star Wars is like the kid version of 40K, but truth be told, there
yes.
are hardcore elements of it.
Yes. No,
So, for
yeah.
instance, I'll give you the hardcore thing, then I'll give you the droid thing.
Okay.
So, the hardcore thing is, do you remember? So, the Phantom Menace is kind of viewed as like a very kiddie movie, right?
Yes.
Like
Oh, yeah.
everybody's like, "Oh, they got kids and it's
The
goofy
Gungans.
and there's this weird
Yes.
humor and Jar Jar Binks and this that kind of stuff."
Mhm.
Do you know what dioxis gas is that the Trade Federation tries to poison the Jedi with in the opening scene
I'm guessing
during
that's some like
negotiations?
Zyklon B like, thing or
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
fucking bioweapon.
Right, right, right,
So
right.
so the implication of that scene, while it's literally just Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi holding their breath for 2 minutes and then
Mhm.
killing a bunch of goofy B1 robot
Mhm.
droids,
Mhm.
is that the Trade Federation is a private entity with a private army. They
Right.
engage with negotiations with rival cartels in the Outer Rim all the time. The implication is that they rig their negotiating chambers with fucking VX gas.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
if negotiations break down, they can walk out of the room, poison their rivals, and throw them out the airlock.
Yeah.
That's fucking hardcore. And like
Yeah.
dioxis, it blisters the skin, it scars the lungs, and it causes internal bleeding.
Mhm. Yeah, George, he definitely had a vision.
That's so fucked up.
And it's funny because that's the same franchise that's like, Star Wars Rebels, and all these like Disney Plus, like kid like things.
Yeah, a lot. Well, I mean, if you start looking at cartoons like Hercules, there's also hardcore elements there.
Right,
But
sure.
but the point is that like when you're a kid, you're just like ah ha 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 ha.
Right, right.
This is just like pod race, or this is pod racing.
Yeah,
You're just kind of laughing. Like meanwhile, George Lucas is implying that the Trade
right.
Federation is fucking killing people with Zyklon and then throwing them
Mhm,
out the airlock. It's like
mhm.
holy shit. Think about that for 30 seconds. But anyways, back to droids. So what's interesting about droids is that there's actually like because it's such a diverse galaxy in that setting, people perceive droids differently. There's people who treat every droid like they're sentient or sapient, because there are droids that are so complex that they almost have a level of sapience, like C-3PO, that kind of thing. Then there's people who are mixed on it, where they treat some droids like furniture and treat other droids like they're sentient, because the C-3PO models are very complex. And then there's like the B-1 droids are like very simple and kind of shitty.
Right.
And then there's people who are fucking bigoted as shit against droids.
No droids
And it's
in the
effectively
cantina.
right, because they're used in law enforcement and military contexts, so they're thought of as like mindless killing machines.
Right.
And so what I actually liked about researching that was there was like the same way that we have a moral gradation of consideration for animals is the way that droids are in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's I think that's a pretty fair analysis. I think that it's I think some people are they don't want to, or they think it's unfair to prescribe like humanity to a droid because it's like a construction of humans, but we're also constructed from something. Whether that's
And that's the terrifying part is like, are we sapient beings, or are we just biological lights and clockwork?
No, for sure. But then again, it gets into the question of, well, to what extent does that matter? Like, I know that I'm a human that enjoys things and doesn't enjoy other things, and that has experiences and stuff like that. I like life. I like being alive. I would rather be here than not. And I think it's totally possible to replicate. Like, it's if you're a human and you like being a human, I think it's fair to also prescribe humanity to a robot that is similar in like consciousness as you're describing it to us, because in the same way that something, be it God or some chemical reaction in the universe, created us, we're creating these things. And if they can think, if they have consciousness, like you're saying, it's I think it's totally fair to prescribe
Have you ever
humanity.
seen this might be a little bit of a tangent, and maybe we should bring it back to like a techno-futurism.
Sure.
But have you ever seen Caprica or Battlestar Galactica?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I actually plan on started watching that today.
Caprica or Battlestar?
Battlestar Galactica.
Okay, so
Yeah.
do Battlestar Galactica first. I actually
Okay.
thought it was amazing. A lot of people didn't like the later seasons. I love the later seasons,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes like a really practical conflict between like sentient robots and humanity, and then it creates all this like mythology and religious voodoo, and it smashes it all together. I actually love it. But the interesting thing about Caprica is Caprica actually talks about the origin of the sentient robots or sapient robots.
Mm-hmm.
And effectively, what it is a human being getting mixed with a robot infrastructure. But the way that they get mixed is they digitize consciousness. And so by digitizing human consciousness and then putting it in a machine, it was sufficiently complex to give it like all these like weird human like quirks. And so I think that's funny and possible too.
Yeah.
That through trying to digitize the human biological experience and then imprinting that on a machine, a lot of people, a lot of transhumanists believe that they're going to be able to digitize their consciousnesses and then transfer that to a robot body. And weirdly enough, I don't think that's what's happening. I think your biological shell is still going to die, but you're effectively cloning your consciousness and putting it into a robot. So you're still gonna
you're gone.
the end.
Right. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah, you're gone, but you're like, you also live on, but it's not like you.
It's not you.
But see, then that opens up a whole other like series of questions. It's like, well, then it's not really a copy of you, because it isn't you, but it is also like the exact like copy of you. So
it would have your mannerisms, sense of humor, maybe some psychological stuff. Like it would have your history. Maybe it would understand like it would. It might not have the actual memories where it can recall a vision of it, But weirdly enough, like it might be able to use the large language model references in order to create a film similar to like Google Veo. You know how it's using prompts to create
Yeah.
movies right now?
Yeah, yeah,
So it
yeah.
won't have your memories, but it'll have like a Google Veo version of the memories in its hard drive somewhere.
Right.
So yeah, so it's all sorts of weird shit like that. But effectively, like I think one of the things that I'm doing, trying to anyways, very poorly, I'm trying to reconcile myself. I'm trying to reconcile myself with mortality.
Yeah.
And some days I do better than others.
Yeah.
And but that's kind of where I try to spread that too, because it gives like the world like a sense of immediacy,
Mhm.
right? Like knowing that I'm 37,
Mhm.
so knowing that I'm halfway through my biological life, I only have so much more time in order to influence things, which puts
Mhm.
an immediacy on my actions.
Right.
Whereas when you're 20 and you're still figuring it out, there's still like this nebulous future.
Oh man, it doesn't feel like that for me at all. I just turned 24 and I already feel like an old man. You know, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that. I was just like, I was in bed the other day, just thinking like, God, you know, I'm 24 and 10 years I'll be 34, and then 10 years after that I'll be 44. You know, and then that's when you really, you know, like it all seems so short to me, especially because I know how fast life up to this point currently for me has already come up. And I was talking to my editor for my YouTube channel. He's into the same kind of like, you know, sci-fi, like futurism stuff that we're talking about here. And so we talk about this stuff a lot. And I was like, do you think that like in our lifetime we're gonna get some sort of like super extended like life, you know, like are we gonna be like in our lifetime, are we gonna
We're
get
gonna
the
live to be
medicine?
200.
Exactly. Yeah. Are we going to get that? And also like the youthful components that come with that. So we're not just like shriveled raisins for like 100 years. Um, and I kind of have a feeling that this may be like too in the moment, like doomer, you know, like with Trump, but uh, I feel like I'm just barely gonna miss that, you know. Like my
No, me too.
children will get that, but I'm just gonna barely
Me
miss
too.
that.
Probably, I would say within the next century to 2 centuries, providing there's no nuclear holocaust,
Right.
providing that we don't die to global warming or some ecological catastrophe, there probably will be gene editing that will minimize disease and might
Mhm.
even have some longevity benefits. I think I'm probably too old for it, so I'm trying to accept that. But I also think that that is the what while I'm trying to reconcile myself with mortality, I also think that it's important for maybe we're the last generation who misses it. We or maybe it's 2 or 3 generations down the line. We still need to like spiritually and psychologically prepare those people for the end.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, let's say that we create a biologically immortal being.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, through happenstance and accident, he's eventually going to die. Like he's going to get hit by a bus. He's going to get hit by a car.
Right.
Somebody's going to stab him or murder him. The sun's going to burn out a billion years from now.
Mhm.
He's going to run out of food. There will be some kind of process that will eventually end his existence.
Mhm.
And so that's where immortality, like one of the reasons why I like 40K so much, is they have immortal beings. You know, like
Right.
the Primarchs are effectively
Right.
biologically immortal as far as I know, or at least they age very slowly. The Custodes are biologically immortal. The Necrons are biologically immortal. The Drukhari, if they can find enough people to vampirize, then they're
Mhm.
technically immortal. But what happens is immortality comes with all these demands,
Mhm.
and these demands like warp your soul. That's
Right.
actually there's a really cool, interesting series called Altered Carbon. The first season on Netflix in
Yeah,
particular is
I've heard of that.
fantastic.
Never seen it.
It's so good.
Okay.
Effectively, they digitize human consciousness so you can swap bodies whenever you want to.
Mhm.
So the ultra rich are able to live in perpetuity through clones, and the poor only get one additional life. Like they're
Mhm.
entitled by the government to one additional life, but
Mhm.
it creates all these like scarcity issues and
Mhm.
moral conundrums of a
Mhm.
biological life. Like people will bring out their relatives for Day of the Dead. They'll
Mm.
rent a body and bring
Jesus.
them back into existence.
Okay, that's interesting.
And there's like a kid who dies in a car accident, but she was only 8 years old. Well, you're entitled to another body, but it doesn't say what condition it has to be in. So
Mhm.
they put her in like a 50-year-old drug addict's body.
Mm.
And so there's like all these fucked up conundrums.
Mhm.
But effectively, like, I think that's why I like 40K is humans are going to human, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I'm also into 40K, not nearly to the degree that you are. Like I play a lot of the computer games, and I like some of the lore, but and I used to play the tabletop when I was younger. Um, but I well, to be honest, 90% of the reason that I'm into it is just the aesthetics. I love the guard. I love the space marines. I love all of those aesthetics. Um, but I do think that it represents or one of the reasons that I'm interested in as well is because it does represent the one potential future of humanity where like we have, like you were saying, this like post scarce sort of society, but we're not able to progress beyond like our own limitations, of like war and tribalism and stuff like that. That being said, I don't I don't think that's the future. I mean, the history of our world is the history of grouping together, and the formation of larger and larger collectives, from tribes to kingdoms, from kingdoms to empires,
city
from empires to
states to
nation states. Yeah,
empires,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, and I do think
Although
that.
weirdly, empires, like, technology is going to help us,
Mhm.
but empires often seem unsustainable because of regionalism and the limits of like information and control. Like, I would view the America or the current United States of America as like an economic empire,
Right.
and I love it. But at the same time, it seems like our foibles and our failings are rooted in the fact that we don't fully understand Afghans, and Afghans
Mhm.
don't fully understand us, and
Right.
Iraqis, and vice versa, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So it seems like there's a limit to empire.
I think, insofar as there's a limit to connectivity, there is a limit to empire. I
Mm.
think that as obviously right now we're seeing a receding of globalism, but the overall trend line is globalization, and as that continues, and as human interconnectivity continues, that I do think will naturally improve over time. I mean, like Europe, I think is a really great example of this, right? Europeans have been at each other's throats basically until World War II ended, and now a war between like France and Germany would be like literally unthinkable. Like if that
Mhm.
happened right now, that would blow that would be like what the hell. Whereas that used to be, just a
The
Saturday.
presumption.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
It was like,
Um,
of course they're going to fight over Alsace-Lorraine. Of course
exactly.
they're going
Yeah.
to send like hundreds of thousands of young men to die in muddy
Yes.
fields.
Right,
Like, it's natural.
of course, they're going to start the largest conflict in human history. Duh. Um,
Well, this is where I get frustrated with ethnonats. I really do, because they seem
mhm,
to have like a really, really passionate fan base of hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And
mhm.
it seems like there's actually some pretty smart, like, liberals or centrists or
Yeah,
moderate conservatives who get swept up in it because they see the passion with which the ethno nationalists speak about their like manifest destiny of segregating from all other races and then moving into this like utopian polity of
yeah,
exclusively the Europeans. And so they get sucked into it. And I get so pissed off because even though they might be smart enough to like understand the rhetoric or politics or whatever, it's like, you guys don't understand. There's like Ugandans who are posting TikToks in English
right, right,
that
right.
people from the Pacific Northwest are laughing at,
Yes.
and then giving super chats to the Ugandans
Hmm.
that then allows them to build up a middle class life in Uganda. And
Yes.
it's like, dude, you don't get it. Like, even if everybody was to become, they call it like race conscious.
Right.
Even if everybody was to become race conscious, it's gonna dissolve in the connectivity of the internet and the breaking down of linguistic and cultural barriers.
Yeah.
And so the question is like, how do you navigate the breakdown of like ethno-religious culture within the soup of globalism.
Yeah, I think that one of the more so I'm a huge immigration guy, love immigration, that's all good. But the one thing that does concern me a little bit about immigration is that most people that are immigrants are very culturally, socially conservative. And you saw, like, the 2024 election was a really great example of this. Donald Trump, I believe, just if I remember correctly, he won a majority of Latino men,
Mm.
despite the fact that, well, I mean, I'm not even going to get into that. It obviously that's stupid.
It was pure vibes. It was just machismo.
Well, no, for sure, but it drives to a point of, like, okay, usually first generation immigrants, like in the United States and Europe, are very socially and culturally conservative. And then their children usually veer the exact opposite way, and are like radical, they them, like communists or whatever. Not I'm generalizing, of course, but you know what I mean.
I meet those kids all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing, and obviously, in the grand scheme of things, that levels out, and they do become just assimilated into the wider blob. But my concern is that we might be getting too many socially culturally conservative and then socially culturally like Marxist people at once, like at an
Yeah, we're
unsustainable rate.
seesawing for sure.
Like in Europe, a good example is uh like the refugee crisis. You have a
And then
lot
the
of
right
people.
wing like wave
Well, and
response,
yes, and then you have the right wing response, but
then
then
the counter response.
you have like a lot of, like, Islamists, that are like in London. Not a lot, but because I don't want to make it seem like it's a majority or even a
Enough to be a
plurality.
problem.
Yeah, it's
Like it
enough
might
to be
not
a
be a
problem
large problem, but it's enough to be a problem.
for sure, and that's my concern. Is it's how do we how do we pad it out so that way we can, like, wait the, like, 2 or 3 generations before they become fully assimilated. Can we survive that, like, initial push in of these people who are not on board with globalism and humanism and stuff?
I think we're going to.
Okay.
I think that these waves. So just as an example, with MAGA and Trump, this is a big wave, and it
Yeah.
is scary. And I know there's some Trump supporters in my chat who are like, "Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Who gives a shit? We had a civil war, blah blah blah." But it is weird
Mhm.
watching Republicans, which I was raised with Republican values,
Mhm.
saying effectively that a republic doesn't matter, and
Mhm.
Hispanic immigrants are an existential threat to the republic, to the point that we need to eliminate due process, which is a Republican touch point, in
Right.
order to mass expedite remove all of these immigrants. That actually
Right.
seems like a crazy
That's
backlash and
psychotic.
abandonment
Yeah.
of principle.
Yeah.
And so that is scary.
Yeah.
Alligator Alcatraz is being built, 3 hours, 4 hours south from where I live.
Mm.
And so seeing that abandonment of principle is scary. But I also think that what's going to happen is a normalization, because I don't think there's another Trump. That I could eat these words, but
Mhm.
Trump is uniquely able to pop into the populist lens. I don't see any other cults of personality that are anywhere near as large. And all of the people who want to imitate him seem like shadows of him,
Mhm.
right? Ron DeSantis, JD Vance, his kids.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't seem like there's somebody as big as that. And I think we're gonna experience economic shocks that are gonna challenge the narratives of the mass deportation people. And I think that between the economic shocks, the midterm backlash, and the lack of a successor, we're gonna survive this period. I think we will.
I do think you are going to eat those words, and here's why.
Uh-oh.
I agree. I agree with everything that you're saying. I agree with everything that you're saying. I agree in the midterms. It's going to be just a bloodbath for Republicans. I think in 2028, probably a Democrat will win. I think JD Vance is going to run. I think he's probably going to lose. But I think that is the blip, in the same way that Biden was the blip. I think that the next Democratic president is going to be the blip and not the trend line. And I think that whoever comes after that is going to be a conservative, probably somebody that we don't know about, that's going to be a total abandonment of just all principles and pretense. And the reason that I think that is because as our underpopulation crisis worsens, and as
the what crisis worsens?
the underpopulation,
Okay. Yep.
and as our resource crisis worsens through things like global warming, and then there's also, you know, waves of like climate refugees. I think that people, especially in the United States, are going to cling further on to the
Nationalism.
yeah, well, just towards the machinations of the past. I think that as though all these global crises are happening, it makes people reactionary. And so I think that Trump is and Trumpism, not specifically MAGA, not specifically Trump, but that sort of like just populist reactionary nonsense. I think that is the new trend line. And I could eat these words, but
that might be here to stay, which actually G Free is laughing at me in chat because he's saying this is the new normal and social media is responsible. So I think that this can be the new normal, but I think that effectively the gatekeepers of the past, the uniparty is often, or the deep state as they were called, the populism is a rhetorical game. It's not a policy game. It's about rhetoric.
Right.
And so this is something that I told Econo Boy on the Live and Learn podcast is I told him, it's like, you have to take a policy that you believe in, that you think is going to resonate with your base, and you need to boil it down to 3 or 4 words. And you need to hit those 3 or 4 words all over and over and over again, because that's what you see Trump do, by the way.
Yes.
And, you know, Mexico, I still remember Mexico's going to build the wall. Oh, wait, hold on. We're going to build the wall and Mexico's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right. You know, the wall just got 10 feet higher, you know, like I remember all that crazy shit. And so Democrats could actually sell relatively sane policy, but they need to have something that's catchy, fun, captures it in 4 or 5 words, and that's it. And then they just got to hammer it over and over and over again.
I agree. I agree. And especially
populism is not policy. It's a tactic.
Especially about that hammering thing. This is something that I talk a lot about on my YouTube channel, which everybody should check out. Is one thing that conservatives are really like locked the fuck into is just never shutting the motherfuck up about something. We're still hearing about Biden. We're still hearing about Obama. We're still hearing about Bill Clinton. Okay. We're still hearing about FDR, you know. They pick something, they have like catchphrases, you know, and they just don't ever shut the hell up about it, which is totally converse to liberals who are just like guppies, you know. They just have the object permanence of like a 1-year-old. Like, dude,
squandering BLM. Listen, Black Lives Matter. Squandering the political momentum of BLM was one of the easiest missed dunks of the past 30 years of politics.
There are so many. Like, dude, those 2 Minnesota state legislators who were freaking murdered by that guy.
Yeah, and they forgot about it within 48 hours.
Just totally been memory hold. That didn't happen a year ago. That didn't happen, you know, like a couple of months ago.
That happened like 20 days ago.
Yeah, it was literally like 2-3 weeks ago, and it's just like, that just, you know, whatever.
You know, Trump supporters, they're going to do that on occasion. It is what it is.
If that happened to like Republican state lawmakers, in the 90s, we would still be hearing about that today. Because they
not just that. If this happened to a couple of Trump sycophants, we would be hearing about it. We would be hearing about how the rhetoric of the left is unacceptable and the normalization of violence within the political left.
Well, we do hear about that with this Corey Comparatori fucking guy. You know,
Luigi Mangione.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, they're turning this dude into like, you know, their Horst Wessel. They're not, you know, not nearly as compelling.
Well, and I don't want the audience to get it misconstrued. I actually do think that the Democrats, for instance, like the Summer of Love and the rioting and the BLM or whatever, like the vibe was that the mainstream media was sweeping for rioting. That was the thing, and there were dozens of murders as a result of the rioting. So there is something to be said. But I think it just like, if you look if you look at right-wing political violence versus left-wing political violence, I feel like this is just true. Left-wing political violence is oftentimes like very decentralized, very unorganized, and very kind of like not reactionary in the political sense. It's like very reactive to an event. So, for instance, like somebody in some city gets killed by a cop, and it's alleged to be racist. Okay, there's riots in that city for like 2 weeks, right? And a dozen people die, and it's all fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like right-wing violence, people can hate me for saying this, but I feel like it's very targeted and often more effective at violence. Like when there's like a right-wing shooter like Dylan Roof, or if you consider jihadists right-wing in the political parlance,
no, for sure,
they fucking kill a shitload of people.
Yeah.
And also the January 6th riot, while limited in scope compared to the BLM riots, it was targeted at the seat of power of the United States.
And a very important process that was occurring too.
Right. So for me, it feels like the right falls back on this thing of like, well, we're not as violent as the left wing because we don't engage in violence as often. But I almost feel like the right wing should concede when it is violent, it goes pretty fucking hard.
Yeah. I mean, there's that guy, in Paul Pelosi's house that hit him with a hammer. There's the guys that tried to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. There's those state legislators in Minnesota. There's so many examples. There's Anders Breivik, in I think Norway.
Yep.
It is far more like the left-wing violence is just because left-wing doesn't even really mean like anything, that like term doesn't even really mean anything. It's just the expression of the crowd, it's just this like blob of people who are pissed about whatever, and they're just like, I'm going to light this car on fire because I'm pissed, and then but then, you look at right-wing attacks and it's like, it's so there's always a very specific goal in mind. Like the BLM riots, they were like, we want to defund the police and stuff, but that's not like a goal. That's like a slogan, I mean, it's kind of a goal,
and,
but
and
like,
it's
what does
done
that
through
mean?
It's done through very boring city hall meetings, not by throwing a brick through a fucking cop's windshield. You didn't successfully defund the police by burning a fucking car.
Right. Whereas conversely, right wingers did almost overthrow the government on January 6th. Like it's apples and bowling balls, and it is the false equivalency. It really pisses me
Some
off.
chatters might object to what you just said, but I swear to God, if there were actually organized right-wing militias who organized that they were going to concealed carry pistols into the Capitol and then they seized it or whatever, it's like, well, what happens then? They probably die because the troops come in. But the point is that, like, if the right wing wanted to conduct a massively violent terrorist attack that unseated the Senate, they could have done so on January 6th. The security forces that were in Congress were not up to them throwing a riot and then storming the building. So imagine if there was like a well-trained militia with concealed weapons that snuck in there in order to conduct a terrorist attack. They could have done infinitely more damage.
And not even that. I mean, like the purpose, right, was to pressure Mike Pence to accept the
to vacate the vote with the false slate of electors.
Yeah,
and all
exactly.
That stuff.
And that almost. I mean, the only reason that we have our democratic process right now is because Mike Pence fell on his sword for the country. And as far as I can tell,
God bless him for that, to be honest.
Yes, no, God bless. I mean, listen, I have a lot of problems with his politics, and I don't agree with everything that he says.
Electrocuting gay people isn't cool, but thanks for saving the republic.
Yes, and that I mean, like we laugh about it, but that does count for a lot. That does genuinely count for a lot.
Electrocuted a few gays. Save the republic.
Yeah, it's a give and a take. Life's a give and a take. But no, it is so much more pointed. It is so much more calculated. And like you were saying, ISIS and like Al Qaeda and stuff. I mean, of course, these are right wing groups. They're very socially, culturally conservative. And the kind of attacks that they carry out are meant. They always have like a specific agenda in mind. There's like a point. They understand.
There's a mission. There's a goal.
Well, but more than that, they understand the sort of like the chilling effects or whatever of those events, and they calculate that into their actions. Whereas the left doesn't really do that at all. They're just like, I'm pissed, so I'm going to go light this car on fire. End of story.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, anyway.
The interesting thing about right versus left is, again, being a huge history nerd, I try to use these terms in the way in which they were like originally defined, which annoys the fuck out of a lot of people, and it actually
Like the
pisses me off when
Napoleon, like left wing, right?
yeah,
Thing?
like
Okay.
the whole point was that during the French Revolution, the fucking left wing was the Jacobins and the people
Right.
who wanted like a secular republic, and so they were viewed as being quote unquote for the people, institutions be damned. And then the right wing was the monarchists and the people who wanted to preserve the social institutions of France, who thought that the people were being unreasonable. And so it goes into shorthand of progressives versus progressives versus conservatives, or progressives versus traditionalists. But that's where it frustrates the shit out of me, because when you look at the American right, we add in another level of complexity, which is effectively that the United States government is in and of itself a liberal or libertarian project.
Right.
And so you have right wingers who are institutionalists in that they want to destroy the entire government and reinstitutionalize like effectively a new king, like a dictator. But then you also have right wingers who are like anarchist libertarians who think the Constitution has been abandoned, therefore they have the right to destroy all government and become anarcho-capitalists within their own little militia commune. And it's like having that marriage of like fascist revolutionary and anarchist revolutionary, it boggles the political analysis.
Yeah, one of the I mean, JD Vance is kind of the ultimate symbol of that, right? Because he is he clearly has, you know, like fascist tendencies, but he also is like he comes from like an anarcho-capitalist kind of background. And you know, like Peter Thiel and Palantir and all that stuff. It's their ideological summit is like anarcho-capitalism, but that somewhere along the way got twisted into like neo-feudal monarchism. It is a really weird and like twisted, very unholy union. But it
But
is
the reason why is like, so that everything you just said seems contradictory, but when you get into the details of it, typically what they're advocating for is they're advocating for like a strongman effectively to become like a minarchist. So they only take care of security. And besides that, the rest of the federal state disappears. And then they have such massive deregulation, and they allow all the great men of society to become, you know, like libertarian robber baron lords, that the great men rise to the top. And so, yeah, it's this weird fusion between fascism and libertarianism. And it's funny, it also appeals to a lot of appeals to my mindset in some ways. And then the great irony, of course, being I wanted to point this out, is that the way that you get there is through cronyism. That's actually what the National Socialist government in Germany was known for best, was once they had dictatorial power. If you're a friend of the party, you get the benefits, you get the contracts, you get this, you get that. If you're an enemy of the party, then you get fucked. You get boxed out of the economy. You get hyper-regulated. You get additional inspections. And that's where, for me, what frustrates me about the right wing, because I have a friend named Phil Labonte who's a libertarian, but he's a Trump guy. I feel like because of their hatred of the left is so visceral, they're sleepwalking into many of the dynamics of early 20th century Germany. And when you pointed out to them that it's a historical parallel, they're like, oh, everyone's Hitler to you. Everyone's Germany to you. And I'm like, no. Look, one-to-one descriptively this matches.
Right.
Yeah, and they still dismiss it.
It really irritates me when people do that, like, oh, well, so everybody's Hitler now. You know, like there's this lady on X named I think Sarah Stock, who is like, oh, great. So, you know, like somebody was like calling her Nazi. She's like, oh, wow. So everybody you disagree with is a Nazi. And then it's like, but it's you are a Nazi,
nationalist, anti-Semite.
Yeah, you're a white nationalist. What do you want me to tell you?
No, but that shit is so funny. So for those of you who don't know in chat, Sarah Stock is this girl who went on to Jubilee and was like, well, what's wrong with xenophobic ethno-nationalism?
No.
And she said that to like Sam Cedar, and they actually had a fight about it.
Yes.
And then she went on to Twitter because the Groypers love that.
Yes.
And so she just became more of a dissident right-wing, like ethno-nationalist freak.
Mhm.
And then I think that I don't think she's smart enough. Maybe I'm being mean. But there are some people who just take talking points and run with them.
Mhm.
And so the talking points that I think she's running with is that Nazism is the specific iteration of fascism in early 20th century Germany of a national socialist, anti-Semitic, whatever, whereas she's not that. She's MAGA. You know, so because of the historical differences between Nazism and her perspective, she's technically not a Nazi, because Nazi, despite being aligned on almost like 80% of their beliefs, Nazism was a German thing.
Yeah, there is this like hyper Platonism amongst the right where it's like, unless you are the
1-to-1.
unless you are like an exact, like they're like, oh wow, so so I'm a Nazi, so I was alive in 1933, and I was voting in the German elections, right? It's like, no, motherfucker, that's obviously not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there are very reasonable comparisons between the things that you believe and the things that the Nazis believe, and also the things that led to the Nazis are a lot of things that you support. And that is the thing that irritates the fuck out of me on the right. Like Tucker Carlson does this a lot, where he's like, well, I'm not a racist. I've never,
I have black fronts.
yeah, I have black, like, dude, and that like,
To dinner
that thing
with
that he did
Thomas
with
Sowell
Ted
the other
Cruz.
night.
Yeah, right. That like Tom or Ted Cruz like thing that he did. I made a whole video about that, and I'm not like I have problems with both what Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson said there, but like Tucker Carlson the whole time he was like, well, I don't have a problem with Israel. I have a lot of Jewish friends, and I actually support the state of Israel. But don't you think it's weird that the official Red Cross said that only 277,000 Jews died in the Holocaust? Like he was doing that. It's like, dude,
Yeah. The reason why, so this is why I try to be I cling to the truth like a fucking raft in a hurricane. That's what I do. And I try to cling to descriptive reality as aggressively as I can. And so it's not working, I'll tell you that. But
yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
trying.
How's that going? Yeah.
It's not great. But the truth, there's a few dozen people who support it. But the thing about it is that when it comes to that, if somebody moves off of the hyper platonic ideal of Nazism, then I move to fascism. And the reason why is because I don't know how much you've studied of it. Effectively, I watched like 2 really good videos from nationalist philosophers, and I also read Benito Mussolini and 70% of Mein Kampf. But what's interesting to me is that, and I think you'll appreciate this, the doctrines of fascism by Benito Mussolini is effectively just him ranting about random Italian shit.
Yeah.
It's actually not like an academic breakdown of what fascism is,
Right,
which I was
right.
very disappointed by the way. I was hoping that it would be like an academic explanation of fascism. And then same thing with Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf was not an academic explanation of the philosophy of fascism. It was another contextual historical analysis of the plight of Germans prior to the rise of Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And so I haven't read Giovanni Gentile, so I don't know if I'll be disappointed in his book, but I had a nationalist philosopher explain it to me. And so what they said is political corporatism and flexible authoritarianism. Political corporatism having nothing to do with corporations. It's treating the nation state as a body. So the economy is the heart, the white blood cells or the security apparatus, the eyes or the intel agencies, the brain is the government, and then flexible authoritarianism, where fascists do not believe in the monarchy as a ancestral rite of passage. They do not believe in the church as like the true religion. They don't believe in the republic as the best way for governance to be done. What they believe in is power. So whatever rhetoric whatever institutions allow them to seize and maintain power, that is what they'll do, and that's what they'll pursue.
Yeah.
Unironically, it's Sith. It's
Yeah.
just Sith. It's just
Yes.
Sith religion.
Sure. Yes. Yes.
I swear to God, it's Sith power struggle religion.
No, that's a good way of that's a good analogy for that. The other the other thing about like the actual like philosophy of fascism is once you get into that niche, then there is also like sub ideologies within that. Like you have Giovanni Gentile, but then you also have people like Julius Evola. And I don't know if you've ever read him. It's very kind of like spacey, kind of very esoteric. The writing is weird, but it's within fascism has never, in all honesty, it has never been greatly described even by its inventors and its practitioners. And I think that the best way to define fascism is as a set of actions that are undertaken as opposed to a set of like beliefs, because I think that once you get into beliefs, that's when you kind of lean into that like hyperplatonism thing where it's like, well, unless I did this and this, then I'm not this, you know.
No, weirdly enough, people ask me that about Trump. They're like, "Do you think Trump's a fascist?" And I'm like, "He does fascism.
Mhm.
He's not smart enough to appreciate the philosophy."
Yes. But it's
Like he
but
doesn't, but he hasn't read Gentile. And if
no, for
somebody
sure.
explained it to him, he would get bored.
But yeah, he would be like, I don't where's my McDonald's, you know.
Which
The
weirdly enough, fascists actually say that though. They say that human beings are naturally fascistic because they
Yes.
don't necessarily care about
Right.
history or structure or rules or law when it comes
Right.
to politics. They
Right.
care about maintaining power, and then implementing their vision, which is why republicanism and liberalism is such a limiting factor on the fascist, because
Right.
liberalism actually emphasizes limitation
Right.
on governmental power, and then what is it, like republicanism emphasizes process,
Right.
and so emphasizing process and limitation is actually like antithetical to fascist seizing power,
Right.
which is funny. Sorry, real quick, just because reckless ambivalence. He actually says, I don't care if they're effectively what he's saying. I'm not going to read the whole thing.
Sure.
Is that I don't care if they're using the tools of fascism as long as they don't end up doing the things that the Nazis did that were bad. And for me,
Yeah.
that's the kind of like social dissolution that allows fascists to
For
do
sure.
all the bad shit.
For sure.
Because if
For
you
sure.
don't have the process and if you don't have the limitation of power, it only takes one bad apple to seize power in order to do whatever the fuck he wants to do.
Power is like water. It's going to take up the container that it's placed in.
Yep.
And if there is an avenue for abuse, that almost certainly will be taken. But going back to kind of what we were talking about just a moment ago, that's kind of like Heinrich Himmler's whole thing is like, listen, most people, they're too stupid for fascism, like as a philosophy. They're never gonna, like, I can't explain this shit to you. I'm not even
Based
gonna bother.
Himmler.
Yeah, exactly right. So his whole thing was like he wanted like this like kind of like secret society, like order of like philosophers who like understood the actual machinations of fascism and then like implemented that on everybody else, and they just kind of dealt with it however, you know, that worked. And I think that right now in the world there is no brain of fascism like there was a Himmler in Nazi Germany. And so I think right now you have all of these disparate communities of fascist or fascist analogous communities, and that because they don't have that like unifying brain, they're just kind of like
They're bouncing off of each other.
well, not only are they bouncing off of each other, but they're just kind of like these mindless husks who are just walking in the direction of
But
destruction.
I so prefer that over an organized thing
Well, for
because
sure.
because sorry, let's talk about that in a moment. Casey says, Connor, show your guest the thing I tweeted at you a few hours ago, please. Okay, Casey.
Okay.
There was a truck that had what is it? The vice president, former female vice president, tied up, bound, and gagged on on the back of the truck, and it was like art
Oh
on the
yeah,
back of the
I've
truck.
seen that with like Biden. Yeah.
Yeah, so Okay, Casey. Good?
I know about it now. I'm aware.
Yes. It's bad and
No, it is.
hypocritical.
Yes.
So hold on. So what's funny about Himmler, the coalescence, whatever, is weirdly enough, I don't know how much of a like committed fascist Thiel is, but apparently, Thiel, sponsored JD Vance in order to get into the Trump admin. He also has like backed Yarvin, Curtis Yarvin, a little bit for some of Curtis Yarvin's stuff. And Curtis Yarvin is like I forget if they call it the cathedral or something, but he's like a new political. He's a new political philosopher that the dissident right loves because he talks about how.
Oh, do you mean like the Dark Enlightenment? Because the cathedral is one of his ideas, but the Dark Enlightenment is the movement.
Well, then I would probably need to read more up on the Dark Enlightenment. But effectively, as far as what I understand from the cathedral is that within the past 200 years, we used to have the king, the church, the family, like all these social structures, and they have been replaced by the liberal technocratic state. So instead, we have the government, we have the bureaucrats, we have the military industrial complex, we got the progressive media wing, and also the family is currently being dissolved. And so is the church. And so if we allow this new cathedral, this new system of power to perpetuate, then all of the things that we associate with like free and strong, maybe not even free, but just like strong Western civilization, it's going to be dissolved in this progressive acid bath.
Yes.
And so the only way to kind of like reassert right-wing power is to reject the dynamic proposed by liberalism and progressivism and to effectively chart a brand new path. And then I don't know what the brand new path is, but I assume it's the Dark Enlightenment.
Yeah, well, so no, you're right. I mean, the cathedral is just like Curtis Yarvin describes it as like the set of institutions that enforce our modern degenerate liberal society, whatever. He and his like followers in the Dark Enlightenment, they want to abolish that power structure to get us onto a more like correct civilizational path, and that is then when we get into the Dark Enlightenment, which itself has sub ideologies.
Well, my question is, what is the correct civilizational path? Because I might be sympathetic. So, for instance, I was watching a Thiel interview where he was basically saying that he was skeptical that anything he had done in government, buying influence, backing Vance, all that kind of stuff, he was skeptical that he had any effect whatsoever on MAGA. And then he kind of like vaguely talked about like the tech futurism that he felt was like holding the species back. But he didn't get into specifics. He didn't say like, I want to gene modify human beings so they're more hardy so we can explore space. He didn't say like, I want to create AI that controls the entire world's things. And if anything, Ross Douthat, which people say I pronounce his name wrong, but I don't care. They say it's Douthat. I have no idea.
I don't know
Ross Douthat.
I saw the interview though.
Yeah. Basically, he was saying like, well, you're saying that you're kind of afraid of the Antichrist who's going to doom humanity to perpetual stagnation through seizing power. But by creating Palantir in the military industrial complex, are you not creating the technology with which the world will be seized for the Antichrist?
Just like he was like,
his face was like,
yes. No, that was a great interview. And I think that really strikes
so funny.
I think that strikes at how like stupid these fucking guys are, right? Because like it is about like what you said. It's like, okay, well then what is the correct path? And that's the question. What the hell is the correct path? And they don't even really have a good answer for that.
Well, do you know what's funny? He got with the military industrial complex guy. I forget his name is fucking. He's got a goaatee or some shit. And they wanted to start. Yeah, they wanted to start a new
Erebor.
They wanted to start a new crypto bank, but Palantir and Elebor or whatever the name is are Lord of the Rings references.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Palantir is like the orb through which fucking Sauron sees everything.
That's the orb from which Saruman views, fucking everything. And Erebor.
And then fucking Elebor was like the fucking collapsed gold mines that collapsed because they were mined too hard.
Erebor was like the giant hoard of gold that's supposed to represent like greed and just like insane greed. And that, I know it's fucking ridiculous. These guys are like clowns, you know.
That's so funny to me because somebody tweeted this meme and it's like 5 or 10 years old now. But the meme was like, what is it? I'm going to use the wrong words, but it's like, government just announces that it created the endless rate machine from the popular science fiction book. Please God, don't create the endless rate machine.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
That's
No, I mean,
Palantir.
yes,
And that's
yes.
Elibor.
Yes. That is a perfect encapsulation of like why reactionaryism sucks, right? Because it's like there is no after. There is no like, okay, here's what. And this is I think that
that's why I enjoyed our conversation, by the way, earlier, was because it seems like you and I are thinking about after.
Yeah,
right?
well, I try to think about after because that seems kind of relevant to everything. But the like, okay, so I watch a lot of debates with people. Like people are like trying to debate like Nick Fuentes or like people like that. And the thing that they're always talking about is they approach these debates so silly in such silly ways. They try to argue the merits of the specific claim that is being made by Nick Fuentes, and that's totally the wrong way to go about it. What you should be doing is saying, okay, tell me your perfect society. Tell me how this is going to work. Describe to me how the economy of this place is going to work. Explain to me how you are going to have perfectly isolated, ethnic countries.
And it's all worse. It's
they
worse.
can't describe it. They can't describe it.
The cure is worse than the disease.
Yeah.
I actually, weirdly enough, I had a conversation with Nick maybe about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now.
Oh, wow, okay.
And effectively, we talked about like Christian versus liberal empire, because I view the United States as like a liberal empire at this point. And so he just described to me like Christian imperium, and I was like, you think you're gonna like honestly, it beggars belief. Because when you move from debunking the descriptive, which I still do, but you move to the prescriptive, it's fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like, you think that I can walk, even if I had law enforcement behind me, you think I can walk over to the black neighborhood right now and tell them they're no longer allowed to travel to the white side of town anymore?
Right.
That'll go over like a fucking lead balloon. You think I can walk over to the white side of town and I can tell them you're not allowed to have black patrons anymore? Yeah. That's not going to fucking happen. Same thing with Hispanics. We're seeing it now with the mass deportations. Yeah, you can still point to a 56% positive we need to do mass deportation stat from a few months ago. But you know what's also happening is people are seeing these videos. The popularity of that policy is dropping. And not only is it dropping, is when you ask those same people who support mass deportation about should there be specific exemptions for people who haven't committed crimes, people who have families, people who work in agriculture, people who work in construction, the answer consistently is like, yes.
Yeah.
So like they act like the most hardcore extreme position is popular.
Yeah.
Not realizing that if they were ever to implement it, they're almost immediately going to reverse. And like it or not, we are a Republican democracy, and what the people care about and like matters.
And the other thing about that is it describes the destructive nature of reactionary ideology, because you can't really implement reactionary ideology like how Nick Fuentes wants, or like how Curtis Yarvin or Peter Thiel wants, because it is like 100% guaranteed to fail. You can't do it. It's going to fall in on itself, either economically or socially or whatever. So that's not really the thing that worries me about these guys. It's more so how much damage can they do in the process? How much shit can they fuck up in the process? Like, I do think there is a light at the end of the tunnel with regards to like immigration and stuff like that. But the question is, how many Kilmar Abrego Garcias do we get before?
And that's the thing too. So because that story got so confusing or whatever, I'm not blasting it up into the ether. However, the fact that we have Kilmar Abrego Garcia back because the Trump admin wanted to punish him for being a lightning rod of the immigration debate. And then he basically says, like, Sakat is not some fucking low security, white collar fucking jail where you play golf. They were basically doing like sleep deprivation and positional torture and food and water deprivation. It's like, oh, okay. So when I was calling it Guantanamo Bay, El Salvador 2 or 3 months ago, that wasn't just a hyperbolic joke. That was actually descriptively accurate.
Yeah.
That is the way that they're treating the people in Sukkot is effectively like they are terrorists and they don't have rights, and you can do whatever the fuck you want with them, short
Yeah.
of just mass execution.
And they, they don't have access to like legal counsel. They don't have access to like the outside world. I think I read in the brief that they get like 30 minutes outside of their cells a day, and their cells are just like massive. They're just thrown inside like,
Oh yeah,
these
it's like
next
60
cells.
people in a cell. I
Yeah.
guarantee you that
Yeah.
eventually what's going to happen, particularly if they keep them for decades, I have no idea how long that it's going to keep them. But they're going to have like a mass pneumonia breakout.
No, for sure. Disease is going to be rampant.
And they're
there.
not going to have enough. They're not going to have sufficient medical care, and people will die from medical neglect. 100%.
Yes, for sure. But going back to like reactionary stuff, is you can't
Sorry, real quick. Somebody in chat says, "Is Andre Hernandez Romero, the gay hairdresser, still in Sukkot?" I have no idea if he's still there, but that's part of the problem.
Right.
Part of the problem is that we don't know if he's fucking there or not.
Right.
And he's in these conditions that we're describing.
Yeah. No,
for the crime of being a Hispanic who came up to the United States seeking asylum.
Right. But the problem with reactionaryism, for setting aside everything else, is that it is just whataboutism. It's just like, well, Trump, well, what about Biden? Well, this, well, what about this? That's not a philosophical foundation for a new society. That's just a philosophical foundation for destruction. And that's what you're seeing with the Trump admin. There is no ideology here. There is no like drive. Like they're not like fascists who are like praying to freaking esoteric Hitler every day. They're not like communists, who are like really intentionally trying to.
Their policy would be more coherent if they were praying to esoteric Hitler every day.
Their policy would be more coherent if they literally had any ideology at all, but they don't. It's just a wrecking ball. Every single person in this administration.
Own the libs, reduce taxes.
They're all running in separate directions. They don't care about anything. Trump is reversing course, within hours. Nobody knows what the fuck is going on. They're constantly giving different reasons for why we need to be doing deportations. It is the perfect symbol for reactionary politics, this Trump administration, because it is nothing but violence and destruction, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, we're hitting about 2 hours, and it's not that I couldn't talk to you for another 6. I easily could. We could probably return to the techniques of near future science fiction, and we could probably talk about the actual application of policy. However, I do want to keep these VODs viewable, where they're consumable by the audience.
Yeah.
So at 2 hours, I think we should probably wrap it. Let's do final thoughts though before we wrap it, because what I would say is what I see in you, even though you said like some policies are center right, some policies are center left, kind of neocon, or neo lib sometime.
Yeah.
What I see though is that you're not looking at the catastrophes of the future, and you're not trying to, at least in this conversation, you're not trying to scare the shit out of online already dispossessed and despairing audiences in order to get super chats. That's not what I'm hearing from you. And so I think we kind of align on the fact that, like, yeah, sure, all of these things could totally fuck us up, but here's the future that we could push towards.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. So what's kind of your thoughts? What's your goal?
Oh man, like politically, or like on YouTube, or like what do you mean?
Yeah, I would say politically, and then I would tie in like your YouTube is your advocacy for your politics, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, okay. So I guess my short-term advocacy goals is trying to push the Democratic Party to be more, well, number one, to fight more, but number two, to also bring things to a more like center left abundance kind of area. But my long-term goals is to create a more sustainable path towards a global tribe, towards realizing that vision. And there are a lot of forces that we're going to have to navigate in our lifetime that are going to make it very easy to fold that dream in. And my goal for my life is to never never extinguish the flame of that vision, because I do think it is beautiful, and I do think that it is something that is worth fighting for.
What's your main social media?
My main social media is my YouTube and my Twitter. I also have a Discord, which it's very small right now because my channel is also super small. But I'd love it if you guys joined.
What's the I typed in Pathfinder, but unfortunately for search engine optimization, there's a lot of like video games and
it's
political
Pathfinder
comments.
415 on YouTube. So I
Pathfinder 415.
415. Yeah, I did that to distinguish from like the Dungeons and Dragons or whatever the fuck Pathfinder thing. Yeah, and then my Twitter is Pathfinder Jay. Just because that's my name. My Twitter or X or whatever is my main like social media. And then my YouTube is where I'm posting my videos. Right now it's a lot more like kind of like clickbaity, like current events, sort of stuff, because I'm trying to like get off the ground. But I do upload video essays. I'm currently in the process of making more video essays, and that's once I sort of cement the base, that's kind of where I want to tilt things more into, is video essays about topics like what we're talking about right now.
Well, and I would say my advice, just because I've been
you've been on the
Warhammer channel. I've been doing political commentary for a while, moderately successfully, right? Like 50 viewers, but if I'm talking about drama, I can get up into the hundreds.
Sure.
And then what I would say too is on YouTube with like Warhammer and stuff, I have moderate success over there.
Yeah.
Find your niche, like what you're able to consistently do, and then do it. And the reason why I'm still doing one-on-one combos, to be honest, having like highfalutin conversations between smart people that aren't trying to rip each other to shreds is not, algorithm bait. That's not going to be the most popular content. Talking about Destiny's sex life and J-Stock, dating Sherry and all that kind of stuff. Like, I almost guarantee you I could double viewership right now if I just changed the title to Let's Talk About BPD Women and Sex Circles. But the point is that, like, you got to have both, right? You got to have the drama to drag people in, and then you have to have the serious ideas so they can, hopefully sharpen.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now. Like, I have today's Sunday. I actually have a video coming out today. I have a weekly series on Sunday called This Week in WTF, where I cover like, sort of the news from the week. And it's sort of like stuff like that I'm trying to use as like the more like drama end or whatever to drag people in. But then I do also have like the more serious video essay kind of style things where I talk about, stuff like this. And that's kind of like the main thrust of what I'm trying to do. But the point is that the overall mission is to perpetuate the goal of a global tribe, and also to ensure that there is a transfer of that ideology from like the 90s, early 2000s into the new like internet landscape that is now much more of like a vat of acid. And
what's it, if you don't mind my asking, are you American or are you different country?
No, I am in the United States. I am an American. I'm actually moving to Spain pretty soon for a little bit for a job. But I won't be there forever. But yeah, I live in the Bay Area in California. So
okay. Oh, right. San Francisco. My bad.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Spain. Just because you're trying to build a global tribe, I still think we're going to have these ethno-religious and racial hiccups or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask what your ethno-religious background is?
Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting mix, and it's interesting because I'm really into genealogy, so I've done a lot of research into like the background of my family. I have a lot of Scottish and English ancestry. I have a lot of Ukrainian ancestry. I have a lot of German ancestry and a lot of Korean ancestry.
Oh shit!
Yes, my grandfather came from Korea. My dad's dad he immigrated.
So you're like a Eurasian mutt.
I'm a Eurasian mutt Jew, because my mom's side of the family are Jews from Ukraine. So I'm like the world's only Korean Jew.
Korean Jew, babe.
Yes.
No, that's crazy. That number one, that's a crazy mix.
It is.
Number two, that's where so I think the advocacy for a global tribe, the reason why globalism oftentimes is associated with the evaporation of nation states and also the evaporation of national identity. And so I can be kind of hostile to that because I love America and I'm proud of America and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
However, what's funny is then like I extrapolate my chauvinism and my bigotry of Americanism, and then I just make that like Terran, you know, like
Mhm.
Earth, and then
Super-
I
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
so I find that my patriotism is transferable, where
Mhm.
instead of just being proud of the United States of America, I can have a regional pride in the
Yes.
United States,
Yes.
but then I can also be proud of Earth. And if I bumped into hostile alien races, then I would
Mhm.
have no problems talking shit to them
Yes.
on, you know, communications
Right.
/ warfare. So you
Well,
got to
there is historical precedent for that. You know, like the Civil War in the U.S. Right? People were far more patriotic about their state, and then after that, they became far more patriotic about the country. You know, so there is precedent to like shifting your patriotism into these larger superstructures, or super states or whatever. So I definitely, and hey, I'm right there with you, man. I'm an earthen nationalist.
perfect.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, it was beautiful. I'm going to keep the VOD watchable, and let's do it again sometime. And particularly if there's like if there's a topic in contention, obviously I like the far out conversations as well. But
Yeah.
if there's a topic in contention like a debate that might be spicy for the audience or whatever,
For
let me
sure.
know and we'll do it.
Definitely. Yeah. I thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate that. But yeah, it was good talking to you, man.
All right. Have a great one.
All right. Peace.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we're at crossed paths right now. Okay. So I do not expect one-on-one conversations to do that well. That's part of the reason why I'm scheduling them kind of late in stream Monday through Friday or on the weekend, depending on the availability of the other party. Yeah, but Pathfinder and I, like, dude, I swear to God, we have like 70%, 80% overlap. What a fucking king. That was so based. And then I also like that we were saying, oh, we could talk about anything, and then we actually talk about like near future, near future technology, near future space colonization, actual like abundance, you know, economics, like all that kind of stuff. I thought that was fucking based. Sometimes I have to slow down and explain my ideology to dumber people. Sometimes I have to, you know, slow down and absorb somebody else's ideology because it's so far out there. But I feel like that's a very natural overlap between Pathfinder and I. So I hope we work together again. Reckless has been thinking about it. I got to say, our current government is this. Politicians all push for the same changes and invest in their efforts and resources into preventing anyone else from doing it before them, rather than them doing it. If taming the government down and promoting people at the same page actually gets shit done, then I'm not going to cry over a hypothetical tyranny. I feel it would be easily preventable. Reckless ambivalence. I viciously disagree. I actually think that we need to preserve the republic and the liberal government. I think that we need to fight back against this fucking malaise that we currently have. And what pisses me off about it endlessly is that there is nothing where people actually have money, like grassroots, who just so kindly generated memberships and money. There are people who have shitloads of cash, not grassroots specifically, but you know, Peter Thiel, Destiny, Vosh, Hassan, to a lesser degree, obviously, Donut Operator, Brandon Herrera. They're sitting on hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Why the fuck aren't they doing it? Not grassroots. Grassroots is helping out a lot. But why the fuck aren't our millionaires and billionaires? What are they fucking waiting for? Right? They wanna chill in the comfort of their own financial wealth, and they want to push their pet project, but they don't want to get out and actually help fix the culture. And so I applaud Donut Operator for going out there and doing emergency disaster relief in Texas. I applaud Stephen for getting involved in electoral politics and pushing that in a direction that he thinks is good for the country. But I want it to be infinitely more intentional than it currently is. Right now, it's very haphazard and it's up to the whims of randos. I feel like we need to cultivate an actual intentional culture around that. Reckless says too many nations have cultures I don't appreciate and I'm not interested. I'll be American. Yeah, well, I have regional American pride and Terran pride. DD22E says, damn, you missed a very cool combo, Jen. Well, that's what VODs are for. Gen X says Connor should have streamed after Destiny started talking about COVID lab leak. If Connor reviews lab leak theory this week, I will kill myself. I won't. I don't give a shit. It has nothing. It has no bearing on it. Thank you for the super chat, Grassroots. I have somehow overwhelmed my usual lateness, but have some meal money. Thank you, King. And also, thank you for the 20 gifted memberships. That is huge, huge, Grassroots. Thank you. Gen X says, Connor, what if Elon's new party is actually centrist? Then I'll join it. We got to figure out what it is. But yeah, I would love to, if possible, if there's because the Forward Party, no offense, is autistic tech bros money laundering. That's what the Forward Party is. If the America Party actually has good policy and it's pretty centrist, then I not only would I join for it and advocate for it, I would try to influence it. Reckless says, correct. They're essentially panhandlers monetizing agreeance or grievance. Yeah. DD22E says, Steven should run for office. The debates would be insanely fire. Dude, I would kill to watch Steven just mog some MAGA politicians on a debate stage. That would be funny as hell. If Elon splits the right, it would be so based. Well, or creates the center-right, center-left coalition. He identified as a Democrat until recently. Derek said it's going to be socially conservative and economically conservative, in my opinion. We'll see. G-Free says Elon is an isolationist. It's so obviously clear. He constantly shits on Ukraine Zelensky. Fuck him. Yeah, and if they do cringe shit like that, then I won't. Yeah. So anyways. So let's talk as a chat real quick, okay? We got 50 people cross-platform. I parasocially love you guys. Thank you for being here. We have two options, and to be honest, I'm favoring wrapping up stream, but I'm going to give you guys an option. What I have to do for the rest of the day, something smells like smoke. That's a little scary, so I might have to go if something's on fire. But what I have to do today is I have to research and script Star Wars and science fiction. So that's where, for me, I could play some content and then try not to be ADD enough that I could write a script. Is something on fire? Oh, it's toast. Okay, thank you. All right, I thought I was dying. Okay, all right, cool. Thank you. My wife prepared me a sandwich. But I don't want to stream to 20 people. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if 50, I don't want to force 55 people to stay on a stream that isn't exciting. See, we already lost 2. So I don't want to bore the fuck out of you guys. Reckless says, what you need to know about Star Wars lightsabers, what you need to know about science fiction, it can be anything in space. No, that's not it. So yeah, I'm not really seeing people be like, oh my God, Connor, please stay live. Please stay live. We want to see you research. Womp womp. Yeah, exactly. Make me a sandwich vibes. No, she walked in and handed me. I didn't even ask for it. So yeah. Grassroots stuff. Still better than the COVID arc Destiny is doing. All right. Let me see if I can do it. Let me see if I can create an entertaining stream while doing things that I need to do. If I can't do it, then I'm going to wrap up even though Grassroots is being incredibly kind right now. My drive, I have the Phantom Menace script. I have Predator versus Corsairs. I have the Predator script, and I need to finish. It's too much, guys. I'm not going to lie. It's too much. It's too much. I got to go. I can't entertain and script. So no. I'm sorry. I have to go. DD22 East is still better than COVID Art Destiny. I will save you on the weekends if I can figure out a way to stream and do research and make it entertaining simultaneously. Christian Blair says, I'm with you until the end. I appreciate that. What are you researching for? Effectively breakdown videos for Star Wars and sci-fi. Grassroots says, won't be boring to me. I just woke up. Yeah, but if actually Grassroots. So number one, I appreciate your donations. They're fucking deeply appreciated. But if you actually rewind the VOD, that was a super interesting conversation about like the future of the human species, speculative science fiction that might become real, socialism and communism being materially prohibited by our current circumstances, what the politics of the world should be, Curtis Yarvin and the Dark Enlightenment and the fascism that is, inherent in our current government, the limits of its ability to affect the republic, whether or not the fascist movement that is under MAGA, not MAGA itself, but underneath MAGA, whether or not that will actually have any real impact. It was actually a really good combo. I loved it. Christian Blair says 280D, exactly. All right. Okay. All right, yeah. I'm going to go work on pre-recorded content. All right. I'll be here tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. EST on Valor Media Network. If you're not already subscribed, type in Valor, VALOR, Media Common Spelling, Network Common Spelling. Subscribe there. I'll be live at 9:30 a.m. All right. And we might be doing Destiny sex drama. So, all right. I parasocially love you guys. Have a great day. Thank you, Grassroots, as always. Gen X's, I finally read the whole bill. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Mwah!